If you've ever taught something clearly, walked through it step by step, explained it thoughtfully, given examples, and then realized learners don't remember it a week later, that experience can feel confusing. The lesson felt solid, made sense at the time, there were no obvious gaps, and yet later on, it doesn't seem to stick. Learners struggle to recall key ideas. They misapply concepts. They revert to old habits. And you're left wondering, if it was clear at the time, why didn't it last? This is one of the quiet frustrations in course design because nothing seemed wrong in the moment. The lesson felt fine, but fine isn't the same as durable. Let's start with something simple. Understanding in the moment is not the same as retention over time. When learners are inside of a lesson, context is doing a lot of the work. You're guiding them. The examples are fresh. The explanation is right there. They can follow the reasoning. They can nod along. They can even answer questions correctly. But that does not mean the idea has been integrated. It means it was recognized. Recognition is not the same as recall. And recall is not the same as application. Those differences matter. Most lessons are designed for clarity. Clarity reduces confusion, organizes ideas, and makes information accessible. And that's important. But clarity alone does not make something sticky. Stickiness increases when learners have to retrieve, connect, and use ideas in varied contexts. If a lesson allows someone to follow along without effort, it can feel smooth. But sometimes smooth means the learner never had to wrestle with the idea long enough for it to settle. Then there's also the issue of cognitive load. When a lesson introduces multiple ideas at once, even if they're explained clearly, those ideas compete for attention. In the moment, everything feels manageable because you're pacing it for the learner. Later, without that structure, learners may struggle to prioritize what mattered most. If there's too much to process, the mind gets tired. And when the mind gets tired, recall weakens. That's not because the teaching was poor. It's because the mind is selective. It doesn't retain everything equally. Another pattern I see, concept stacking. You introduce one idea, then another, then a related nuance, then an exception, and then an advanced application. Each addition makes sense. Each layer feels helpful, but over time, the core principle gets buried. Learners remember fragments, not structure. And when structure isn't retained, application becomes shaky because application depends on pattern recognition. If learners can't see the pattern clearly enough to replicate it, they revert to surface details. There's also an emotional component to stickiness. Ideas that feel personally relevant tend to last longer. Ideas that feel abstract or distant fade more quickly. If a lesson feels intellectually clear but emotionally neutral, it may not anchor deeply for your student. That doesn't mean you need theatrics. It means learners need to see where the idea intersects with their own decisions. When something connects to future action, it holds weight. When it feels like general knowledge, it drifts. Another factor is timing. In many courses, lessons are consumed in quick succession, module after module, video after video. The pace feels productive, but compression reduces reflection. When learners don't have space to revisit and apply ideas, those ideas remain fragile. They're understood, but they're not reinforced. And reinforcement is what makes concepts sticky. This is why learners often say, I remember you talked about that. I just don't remember exactly what you said. That sentence reveals something important. The concept was recognized, but it wasn't stabilized. Stability requires deliberate engagement, not just exposure. Exposure introduces, engagement embeds. Most experts respond to forgetting by adding to their content. They add more examples, more explanation, more summaries, more resources, but more volume does not necessarily improve retention because the issue isn't missing information, it's that the idea wasn't made durable. Durability depends on whether the learner can retrieve and apply it, not how many times they hear it explained. When a lesson feels fine, it often means it was clear, it was organized, and it was coherent. But lasting learning requires more than coherence. It requires effort, not overwhelming effort, but meaningful cognitive engagement. If learners can move through a lesson without needing to make distinctions, test understanding, or retrieve ideas independently, information fades quickly because the mind conserves energy. It keeps what's used and it discards what's not. This is why you can teach something beautifully and still see it disappear. It's not a failure of intelligence, and it's not a lack of care. It's often a design issue around reinforcement and retrieval. When lessons don't revisit and build on core ideas over time, each module becomes isolated, and isolated ideas are easier to forget. Connected ideas last longer. If you're noticing that learners understand in the moment but struggle later, that's useful data. It suggests the lesson worked for clarity, but it may not have been structured for durability. And durability is quieter. It shows up later in independent decisions, in confident application, in fewer reminders needed. Designing lessons that land isn't about adding more, it's about being intentional. That's a different design lens than simply asking, is this clear? Intentionality asks, will this last? If this reframes how you're thinking about your lessons, that's great. It doesn't mean your teaching is weak. It means clarity was prioritized. And now you're thinking about durability and stickiness. That's course design. Designing lessons that continue working after the video ends.